But anyway, so thank you, everyone. I had a great night last night. I hope everyone else did. And here we are, day 2. Lots of good stuff happening today. So one of the things I'd like to start, one of the keys of the sort of the threads yesterday was that I think timing is everything. You know, Maribel talked about AI, and AI has been a term that's been around forever, and it's been tossed around. And the timing may not be quite there yet, although we're moving there, but it's in terms of timing, the timing has to be right for that. I think Kurt, when he threw up that slide of the graveyard of dead companies and talked about them not either missing the wave or not riding the wave long enough, timing with that is also important. So I'm going to start with a little story. I always give little anecdotes of my life. But so I think everybody's familiar with the movie Good Will Hunting. So here's a little anecdote. I actually at one time there's a tavern that they hang out at in the movie. It's actually the real name of the tavern is the L Street Tavern. I actually lived over there for a while when I was a long time ago. My parents rented out that apartment there. But my friends actually, I had friends, high school friends, who actually owned that bar. And here's where timing comes in. So they didn't run the bar very well. In fact, they had an illegal barbecue in this tiny little alley in the back where they, you know, if somebody ordered a hamburger, you'd think they're going in the kitchen. No, they went in the back alley and cooked it. This is South Boston, so it was okay. Everyone was being paid off. Everyone had a little largesse. But anyway, so it didn't do too well, so they decided, you know what, the business we're losing money, so we're going to sell it. So Bobby Cox was his name. He sold the bar. The day after he sold it, Robin Williams walked in, talked to the new owners and said, we'd like to make a movie. And then it just like zoomed off. So timing was everything for that. So that's my little anecdote, just to prove it is. This is going to be a very interactive session. I like to get not only my panelists involved, I gave them a list of, I think Raj said it was an exhaustive list of questions. It's almost like a booklet. Yes. I probably won't get through all of them, but just to give them an idea of what we're doing. But I want to get the audience involved too. Highly interactive. I know it's the first session of the morning, but I want to charge everybody up. If I see somebody, a hand out there, you have a question, I'm not going to say any questions, raise your hand, challenge the panel if you have a comment to say about what we're going to talk about. So we're actually going to talk about a few things. I'm going to have some slides before I turn to the panel. So I'm with the CIO Executive Council, and I'm not going to go into a long-winded spiel of what it is. It's a community of IT leaders, a global community. My colleague is here, Steve Carr. I'm not sure he's here this morning. Steve, you out there? But he's here. I'll be here during the conference, the table sessions if you want to talk to me about the council. But right now it's all about the topics. So we have a great panel here. To my left is Mark Bai, then Frank Sirianni, and Raj Sadasivan. Okay, sorry about that. Who just arrived. He was severely delayed yesterday. And he's almost a dad-to-be. Frank is a grandfather, a recent grandfather. But anyway, so we're going to talk about a few things. Not yet. All right, so 3 things we're going to talk about. One is the issues that IT people, IT leaders will be focusing in 2018. And again, we put a lot of effort into talking to a lot of the CIOs, a lot of IT leaders who are part of our group. The first and the greatest thing is IT talent. We're talking about all this digital transformation, culture, things you have to do in the organization to keep up, more integration with business driving projects, but it's all about the people. And finding the right people to go in your organization to master these things and drive them forward is one of the toughest challenges, has been a challenge. It's going to get even more challenging going forward. And it's not a problem of finding technology talent, because there's a lot of it out there. You can find coders, but you want to find people who have some business savvy, business sense, customer awareness, things like that, and that's what we'll talk about. The next topic is business integration. Yesterday, a point was made that if IT is driving a project, then it's doomed to fail. I don't know if Kurt said that or somebody said that, but and that's actually true, because the business side is IT has more is sitting at that table, not making the decisions, but advising business whether something is feasible or viable from a technology standpoint. And now business has to either give their buy-in or really drive this thing, because again, it all gets back to the customer and how it's going to benefit the business in general. Technology is so integrated across the board in corporations that if the technology assets aren't up to par or they fail, it's going to impact the business. And finally, the final topic will be adopting a product management mindset, and that's kind of unique. And by product management, I mean from an IT perspective is not only knowing the customer, but knowing that product. And it doesn't mean you have to have you know what drug you're selling, or you know what what you're manufacturing, but you have to know what the customer wants and what the product is, so you can develop the technology to best produce it, market it, follow it, and do all sorts of other good things. And one of the things we'll talk about is that, is the question, can a project manager, from an IT perspective, become a product manager? So I have my own viewpoints on that. So I have some slides. So this first one, we do a lot of research. So this is an IT talent. So as I said earlier, the struggle for getting quality people within an organization is increasing. And you'll have all access to these slides through Phil and his team later on. So we did a survey earlier this year, and we asked companies how they're looking at IT talent. And most of them found it was challenging. I mean, they can't find these people. One of the hottest titles right now is business relationship manager. And these are people that sit on the business side, and they are advocates for IT, but they sit with business people. They're paid by IT, but they think like business people. It's the toughest position to find. Martha Heller is a collaborator with us, and she's a very well-known IT talent recruiter, and she can't find people to fill that position. And not surprisingly, it's one of the highest paid positions out there. It's finding that unique individual. There'll be more and more of these people, and Frank maybe can talk about that from an education standpoint and training people for that. Again, as I said, finding qualified people is tough, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. I'll let you get right to the conversation. And finally, what type of people are they looking for? They're looking for people who can think on their feet. As I said, finding coders is the easy part. You can train people for coding. We have kids in grade school who are learning coding now. So that's not the tough part. The tough part is being able to think how to apply it, best apply it, and then be agile with it. If something happens in a project, most likely you're working in a team, how quickly can you shift gears and course correct to make this thing happen, or just trash it? Just decide it's going to fail. Why waste time? Move on to the next thing. Go back a little bit. So IT people are increasingly, as I said, being pulled into strategic activities. They're talking more with CEOs. They're talking more involved with the C-suite, and that's going to get more and more intense to the point. And I'll have some slides on that later on, that CIOs and IT leaders will be acknowledged as corporate officers going forward, and that's something that my organization is striving. We've been working for the past 2 years with a number of CIOs, Frank being one of them, to really push that whole thing forward. We actually have a journey map on that we're releasing very soon. They're working more with line of business people down in the trenches in the business side, and working closely with the customers. And this just gives a current snapshot of collaboration. So meeting with customers, this is all about having that product management mindset, knowing who your customer is. And it doesn't mean you have to, a lot of cases IT people are going off and they're with a business partner and they're visiting customers, which is healthy, but it doesn't mean you have to call the customer up, that you're the main point of contact. You're still providing the technology, but you have to know what that customer is. I like to tell people it's almost like it's disassembling something. It's back in the 1940s, when the transistor radio was around. The Japanese were able to mass produce it because they took it apart and put it back together more cheaply than we could, and that's how it all happened with them taking over that market and other markets going forward. You have to almost like disassemble it and find out what makes it tick. This is a quote from Martha Heller I mentioned before. So it's all about IT's role changing and having more of a product mindset, that product management mindset. Know your product, you got to know your technology, but the people that are in demand today aren't necessarily the people who are going to sit down to the coding. They're the people who know how it's applied and best applied. And it's really not someone who studied technology. It's someone who had that across-the-board knowledge of business and technology. And this is just a chart. I'll let you guys look at it. It's kind of small printing, but as I said, you can get a copy of this. But it's what a product management framework. These are the criteria and the traits that you should be looking for in that ideal individual. Okay, so I'm going to get to this fun stuff. So I'm going to sit down, and again, please interrupt us with questions, because that's what we're here for discussing and having fun and doing all sorts of things. Okay, So what I'm going to start is very briefly. I'll go from left to right to left. We'll start with Mark, and if you could just tell me a little bit about what you are and what you're doing in the organization, and then we'll go right to the questions.
Sure. My name is Mark Bai. I work for, it says Interbank One there. We're a subsidiary of People's Bank, which is a regional bank in the Kansas City and Denver area. And I have, for the last several years, been in charge of the infrastructure group, which is all systems, network, those kinds of things.
All right, thanks, Mark. Frank?
Hi, I'm Frank, and I'm a grandfather now. So you can.
He has photos, so he'd be more than happy to show it.
And videos.
It's a short 30-minute slideshow. Whenever you feel like it, just stop me in the hall. So I've been at Fordham for 12 years, which is a long time. My career really has been as a startup or turnaround CIO in the higher ed space. I am a corporate officer, which is very unusual in our industry. I mean, in higher ed, which has lagged, has tended to push IT down into the operations. And I own both vectors, the business side and the academic side. Because remember, our products and services are teaching, learning, and scholarship. So I manage both of those ends.
And finally, Raj.
Yes. Hi, Raj Sadasivan. I'm the Chief Customer Experience Architect with Schneider-Electric. How many people know Schneider-Electric here? Oh. Yeah. So we are a very small company. We are in more than 100 countries with 160,000 people with around $30 billion revenue. And I think for us, we say, within Schneider-Electric, access to energy is a basic human right. So we have a lot, it's a big audacious goal. And customer experience is huge for us. And I think we have a lot of things happening. I think we were on globalization route, and now we are on digitization route. And we don't have CIO anymore, we have CDO. So similar to what you were saying, Tim.
Yeah. Great. So my first question is going to focus on IT talent. And again, a little anecdote. I started my career at Computer World many years ago. And when I was as I moved up the ladder, I was in a position to hire people. And we actually hired a person who was a great candidate. This guy was a terrific writer, great thinker. He had experience. Came in, we set him up with his desk and everything. He did the whole day. And when I came and said, "So how was your day?" He said, "I don't think I want to work here." And he walked out one day. So could I have seen that beforehand? Well, probably not, but maybe that's something we could talk about as well. So let's start with the first question. What do you see as some of the major challenges going forward into 2018 in terms of attracting IT talent and that those people that you need to drive the business forward? So Raj, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say I think it's about everything is digital, right? So that means if we don't provide digitization, I think you'll be exposed. So you need people who understand that, and that's not the traditional IT. It's a different thing, a different mentality. Mm-hmm. I think you talk about business acumen. So you will need business acumen when you are in the traditional IT. With digitization, you need to be digital. That's it. I think you have to always sense, always changing, right? So you need people who can do that, and that's a different skill set to have. And the key challenge for us is that, okay, ever-changing world, what do you do? How are people open to that? Because, so we are in more than 100 countries. If you go to France, I think they'll say, no, I don't want to do this. Of course, you can say that in France, or not here, right? You get fired, right? So it's important to understand how we can push it, the right people, and how we can acquire talent from outside so that we can have the right balance. And that's what we are struggling.
So, but that has to be immensely difficult. So, digital transformation, being from South Boston, I can say, hey, I have a friend who's in digital transformation. He was arrested for stealing television sets from Best Buy, and now he's dead in house of correction, digital transformation program. But in terms of digital transformation, how do you recognize that in a person? I mean, it's easy to recognize if they have technology talent, if they have a management background or experience. But with so many things changing, and even the definition for digital transformation depends on what company you work for, how do you recognize that in an individual? And Frank, since you're at Fordham and you're a corporate chief, tell us.
Yeah, so people, so universities are change averse. They've pretty much been the same for 400 years. So it's a built-in dynamic, and it has always been that way, right? Full of liberal people who are very conservative about what they do, about processes and systems. But what we've done over the last 5 years is feeling, I think, the threat from social, commodity commuting, mobility, content, all those things out there that Gartner actually started talking about 5, 6 years ago. We went on a track to shift our focus really to, we'll say, the business. But remember, again, for me, there's two components. There's the academic, and then there's the, we do everything you do on the business side, and then we have to support faculty and students. And faculty are like individual entrepreneurs. I mean, they're charged with being experts in their one little field, and in no way feel loyal to the institution. It's to their discipline, their scholarship, and that means people all over the world that are doing the same thing. So long story short, we've really focused on soft skills. For one, we've also had a cloud strategy that we call our customer first cloud strategy. So we have our ERP in the cloud. We have like 90% of our applications, and we've invested in staff, in new skills, and we've abandoned some. So, for example, on the business side, it would be contract negotiations, vendor management, things that, systems people really didn't do before. But we've also been able to migrate people to customer-facing roles. So we have a lot of what we would call business analysts. You just use a different term for them. And they have deep business skills. And then on the academic side, we have what we call instructional technologists. They're really business analysts to support teaching, learning, or research. So it's been a purposeful effort. We have a problem, we were talking about this last night, because our headquarters are in the Bronx, New York. There's there's nothing to do after work. I mean, getting millennials, keeping them, especially in the security and analytics. We have a great analytics team and great services, and they're starting to really be adopted. We're losing staff all the time. It's a constant turnover. But with that said, this strategy has worked because we've gone from a vacancy rate of about 12% to 4%, which is very significant. And that's a savings in administrative time and effort across the board. Just really quickly, we try to make the business analyst generalist. So there's a woman who came from HR. She didn't come from IT. But we've exposed her to some of the academic stuff, to some of the other components of the university's business processes, because we need them to be generalists. Same thing on the academic side. We have videographers, people with deep media skills, and they tend to support a particular school or discipline. So a university, like we have 9 lines of business, right? There's a dean of business, a dean of education, a dean of arts and sciences. These are very different cultures, very different faculties. And so we assign people or embed them. Sometimes they just totally live there, a federated organization. Who know that area but have general skills and an access to the whole group. So it's an ongoing struggle, to be frank. We also developed our own organizational effectiveness team. So we do wellness, we do weight challenges, they do fitness challenges. There are X times a year, there's a CIO required meeting for everybody. At least one of them is just fun. It's like a picnic, on the lawn. Others are thematic. We did something on systemic racism or Title IX, which is a law that affects us. But we try to mix the fun with the bad. Third, I have developed a program for high performance, high potential people. It's called the Fordham IT Laureates. So, because in an institutional setting, people stay, but there isn't always opportunities to advance. So that's soft skills, self-coaching. It's inexpensive. I do use a professional coach who manages that, but it's a kind of middle-out management change, and it's had a big effect. And then people have to qualify. They write essays, short essays, around 2 questions, one about themselves and one about the mission of the university. Finally, on retention, mission. Being in a university is an advantage because a lot of people get caught up in what we're doing, right? What are we doing? We're creating, preserving, and transmitting the culture. So if you can sell that's the upside of the institutional setting.
Thank you, Frank. Someday I hope
Stop me or I'll keep going. You know
No,
me,
I'm
Tim.
gonna stop you. Someday I hope to go to college as soon as I get my GED. It sounds really good. So Mark, what is it possible to if not recognize someone as the ideal candidate, to train that person? And I ask that because everyone says, oh yeah, we have internal training programs and we take people from IT and we put them with a business partner, and I'm thinking to myself, not really. It looks good on paper, but IT being IT, it's going to pull you back to the tactical into the trenches, and that's what's most important. So what kind of challenges do you have from that standpoint?
Well, I guess in some sense we have the advantage of being a small organization. The generalist is what we have to do. And there are some real advantages to that, I think. When we hire people in, they usually get teamed up with someone else who is doing a similar job function, but that person will be taking on different aspects of the IT work itself. But the last person we hired in, for instance, when we just kind of do a walk around when somebody comes in. And so we were walking them around, introducing them to the different business people, and their observation was, these people like you. And yeah, they do.
It's like the Sally Fields thing.
Yeah, they love me. But it is true, because we do keep, as a small organization, a real finger on the pulse of what's going on in all the different business areas. We actually spend a lot of physical time talking to people. I don't think there's any replacement for that. No system will allow you to understand what the business needs are, unless you're sitting across the table talking from them, going to lunch with them.
Yeah. Now, do you actually have a partnership program? Do you have a mentorship program?
We don't. Our IT organization is 25 people.
Okay. So I'll ask that to Raj, since he's a little bigger than you, both
Just a
physically
little.
and his company.
Yeah.
And do you have a training program internally, a partnering program?
Yes, we do, and I think it's important to note what Mark mentioned. I think generalization is important, and I think for us, like you were saying, we talk to each other face to face. In our world, it will never happen.
Right.
Then we are out, right? Because we are all over the place,
Right.
and so adaptability is a huge thing. And how do you adapt? So if it is virtual, not everybody likes virtual, working environment. So when we look at people, are they open to that? So I think, Frank also mentioned about soft skills. So soft skills comes into, a big play here, right? Because you need to adapt, but you also need to understand that, okay, you can maneuver, where the culture takes you, right? And can you push it? So we do have training programs, soft and hard training programs. We also have partnership, and we also go to different conferences. So for high profile or high potential folks. So we have a mixture of a lot of things, and I think our learning team does a good job in kind of bringing new training on board. A lot of times, and as you said, I think you mentioned tactical. Yeah, you get sucked into the tactical thing. And people don't spend time to kind of improve themselves. So that's the challenge you always face, and that's where the adaptability factor comes into picture. It's up to you. It's not about anybody else.
I just want to add to that. It is because we are all two things that we share. One is analytical skills, right? If you really can't be in IT if you're not an analyst. And then is this desire to fix things. And people devalue the soft things, the time for the meeting, the lunch, the coffee, and you have to find people. And maybe I can't give you a formula for that, but that's what you're looking for, because that's important. Sometimes they don't want to do PMO work. They don't want to put their reports in because it's not, it's not hands-on. So I don't like the term soft skills, but that's what we've been using forever. Yeah. But one of the things that grew out of our laureate program is a coaching cafe. So the staff themselves, so this is not available to executives, it's mid-level down. They've developed these coaching cafes. They pick a topic. Raj is an expert on X. Let's ask them to come in and have a brown bag. And
it's like a lunch and learn type of thing.
Yes, lunch and learn. Yeah.
Cool.
So that just grew out of the staff. That was some of the things they learned in that coaching.
Right. And anybody else have training programs? They want to talk about the success of that or failure of that? Any questions you want to raise in terms of that? Anybody out there doing internal training for the business aspects of the IT person, like officially? No one? No one's doing a training program. Shame on you. So yesterday, one of the terms used, and it kind of grates me, and not because of my age, I think young, millennials. Everyone says, oh, we got to get millennials in. You know what I'm thinking? You don't try to put that in the pocket of millennials, because if you want to do that, what you really want to do, and this is something that probably Frank focuses on from the education side as well, is the Generation Y is fine, but Generation Z. So Generation Z are the kids who are in the 7th and 8th grade, or they may be in juniors or seniors in high school, and it's a total different mindset from millennials. They grew up with technology. They're very comfortable with smartphones and all the latest gadgets and social media tricks and traps and all that stuff. But when you ask them, what are they looking for in an employer, what they'll tell you, more so than millennials, is, well, I'm looking for someone who, if I'm going to get involved in a business project, I want to talk to the person face to face. Millennials are saying, just message me. Let's use the tools to talk to each other. Generation Z says, I want to go in the room, I want to talk to you face to face. And by the way, I plan to stay at your company 4 to 6 years. Millennials are saying, I only want to stay there 3 years. And your brand is important, where the Generation Z says, yeah, brand's okay. Coca-Cola may not be there. If you listen to some of the people from the MIT Sloan School in a few years, and 40% of other known brands, because they're not moving fast enough. So they're focusing on who I can work with. I'll follow the leader, so to speak, of that organization, and if that leader is good and that leader leaves, I'm going to walk away with that leader. So it's more of a people-to-people thing. Are you finding that's happening out there? Is that the case, or is it just some academic nonsense that I pulled out of my pocket?
I did think people do both join and stay with an organization if they believe in its purpose, and that is driven by the leadership and the culture that's just developed over time. Mm-hmm. So I would agree generally that is true, yeah. and that it's good that it's happening that way.
Have you have any experience with? Obviously, I don't recruit millennials. I'm not an IT organization, but you're on the front lines talking to them. Are you finding that it may be overhyped in terms of what their qualifications are? And I'll give you an example. There's a guy who was at Phil's last conference, an IoT conference in October, one of our members, and he's the County of Santa Clara IT leader. He's in charge of innovation. Mm-hmm. But one of the things he's doing, because who wants to work for county government, when you can go work for Tesla? So what he's doing is he's having a lot of trouble getting young people in there, especially in the area of Orange County, where it's highly competitive. He's hiring what he calls experienced, not older people, but experienced people, in their 50s or something like that, and giving them the flexibility if they want to work one day, if they want to work at home. It's around your schedule, and it's working wonders for them. So they're kind of, flipping it and saying, you know what, millennials are important, young people are great, got to feed from the bottom, but we have a lot of talent out there at the upper end, so we're going to take advantage of that as well. Mm-hmm. So are you finding that shift is happening, that it's the whole millennial thing is going away a little bit?
It's all about motivation, right? So what motivates them? And if you're able to provide that, you can attract them, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what I've seen is that a lot of times they want to do cool stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to tactical, operational stuff, they won't get motivated because they're seeing Google and Apple and Microsoft every day. So we need to provide that ammunition to say, okay, it's interesting. Right. So I think they're looking for interesting work. They're not looking for static work.
Yeah. And so you have innovation labs and stuff like that.
Yes, we do. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's so. In our company, average I think tenure is like 10 to 15 years. So when you bring in new people, they think differently. And I think I was telling you guys, I have a word called Schneiderized. So if you are Schneiderized,
you've been Schneiderized.
Yeah, that's right. That means you will think, oh, it's okay to do tactical work, right? Right. So we have innovation labs, and I think everybody does innovation. So it's not just one group does. So everybody can be involved in it. So that's a good thing. So that was our CIOs, kind of direction that okay, we don't do just in one group. Everybody does it. So that actually helps people. So if you look at in our innovation group, we have average ages of 25. Yeah. And it's all over the world.
And is it run by IT or run by business?
It's actually a combination of both. I think when you do innovation, no more it's IT. So you have to explain to the business leaders what this is. So that's the tricky one. And a lot of times, the folks who are coming new, they don't understand. They'll go from a technology perspective. So you have to kind of, coach them to say, how do you say it?
Right, right. Anybody else do innovation labs or as part of their culture in the organization that they want to talk about? It's a tough audience this morning. Something in the eggs, I think.
Was there a hand back there?
They give them coffee, right?
No. So,
Frank,
to both.
you're like the incubator of talent. So.
Sure. So I can agree with everything that was said, but Mark mentioned what I called mission. You mentioned motivation. It's really key for us to tie people to what the university does. So Fordham's not that old. It's only 176 years old. Right? So
you're
again,
not Schneiderized yet.
no, we call it Fordhamize. It's very similar. It's a dangerous thing. So, but we have recently, for example, I have a recent graduate who had interned. I have a recent PhD in molecular biology who interned. They're in the PMO, believe it or not. They certainly understand the academic side. Okay, and I think the millennial thing is a little overplayed.
Thank you, Frank.
But you have a mix of people. The average freshman that comes to Fordham to live there brings 5 devices. Mm-hmm. To your point about who's coming in now, 5 devices. And this hit like a crash 3 years ago. All the universities were caught off guard because they want wireless, right? There's a gold mine there. So we've been doing a lot. We use student workers, but several of them have evolved into staff, and that's been very rewarding because they really are committed. Are they going to stay there for 30 years? I don't really know, and I don't care, right? In a sense, it's a mix. It's a mix, and it's a mix of generational orientations, to your point.
Right.
I have some people that, back to this shift, we have this customer-first cloud. Let's shed some skills that we don't need that are commodities. So my favorite is a fella, he's probably almost my age, who was a COBOL programmer, which if he wanted to be a consultant, he could be rich, right? But he went through this laureate program, and now he's our workflow imaging guru. And that's been workflow for us has been a big high ROI project, right? We laid in ERP, we laid CRM over that, but where the efficiencies have come is from workflow. As CIOs, we've been saying for 30 years we can do it faster, better, cheaper. And now I have a couple of case studies of that. So this gentleman, who was a COBOL programmer, bored to death, shy guy, he's out there. And he, with him, will have a very young person, his contract employee, and they've killed it. They've saved the university millions of dollars.
Right.
And improved
like
services.
a mentoring program. I think we have a question over here.
I have 2 things. One is about the training. So I feel training cannot be enforced. And I've seen a so-called a failure on that side is when you enforce people to go to a training without their own self-interest into that and incentivize it. Say that, hey, you're going to get 3 points towards your some commitment if you go to this training. It never works because the people who go there, show up there, they're literally looking for that point, not really that content of that training. So we need to identify these resources, these members in your organization who are willing to learn, to go and enhance their knowledge base. So these are the individuals which I think you should be targeting to go for those additional. Now the second part, I'll tell you about interstate batteries. Sometimes it's not important just to go and send them to an IT training. In interstate battery, almost every IT person is supposed to go and have at least some information about what batteries do, how do you handle batteries, what your distributors are doing there in the field, because if you have that kind of information, you can correlate to your day-to-day work as well. You feel privileged that you're serving somebody. You're not there directly selling batteries, but you know exactly you're providing them the tools to help them do that thing. And that connection sometimes makes a significant difference between your productivity, you're looking into the company, and being loyal to it.
So that's very interesting. So the last point is knowing your product. Obviously, if you have the time and you're not pulled back into that tactical. But focusing on the first thing, so training and forcing people into training, or putting a program there where it's required to go, and it doesn't work. That's a very interesting concept.
May I?
Go ahead, yes.
So everybody in our performance management system, everyone has to have a professional development goal for the year. But I couldn't see the speaker, the gentleman said, there are some people who just aren't going to change. So I have a legacy person, I'm not going to say what department. We make him as productive as possible. We've tried everything. It's really in analytics, so it used to be report writing. It's very different, right? It's a very different discipline. But we keep him functional, we give him work. You're right, he is going to be the same until he retires. And in our organization, it will be retirement. But lots of you have to find the people who want to embrace it, and many have. So I think fear is a driver. So 5 years ago when we said, I challenged the CTO, no data centers, and we had 3 plus a hot site at Santa Clara University. People got, oops, this is serious, right? And so a lot of those systems people are now, one is the director of innovation, one is training, customer facing across the board. 2 have moved over to academic computing, but they're supporting the research cycles. You know, we put up servers, more than servers, supercomputers, whatever. So, I mean, and I actually, a few have been static, but I hate to use the word fear, but I think the people were worried, my job's going to go away. We're not building servers. You know, it's digital platform services, it's Azure, it's AWS, and that's it. But some are not going to make it, and you just have to. We're big enough. We're not as big as my friend next door, but we're big enough that you just have to absorb them and make them productive.
Yeah, and fear is a good motivator. Although you don't want that to be the only thing out there. It has to be something more than that in terms
But
of.
people have had fun with it. I think these people love their new jobs.
Yeah. If
You
somebody.
know, 2 people are legal liaisons, on contract negotiations. They didn't know anything about that before in their lives.
Yeah,
You know?
so one of the other CIOs I talked to recently said it's important to develop a personal value proposition for every worker that you engage with, that find out what motivates them, what are their goals, and then it's going to take a lot of work, but you have to build a program around that person. It might be tough from a Schneider point of view and a massive, doing across 160 countries or whatever, but it's important, if it's important to you and it's important to the person's going to stay there. I'm going to shift gears a little bit in deference to the time. We're going to talk about the business integration, dealing with the business side. What are some of the challenges, and how important is it to build trust? What kind of tactics do you use to build trust between IT people who, some people have this warped sense that they're still wearing pocket protectors, and the business side, which looks at them as a service bureau. How do you break down those barriers, Raj?
Yeah, I think there's no cookie cutter approach here. So when it comes to people, you need to understand. So that's where the soft skills comes into picture, and it's also experience, right? So when a business, stakeholder comes to you, they will say, okay, I need SAP, I need Oracle. They always come with a solution. They don't come with the problem, right? So now you kind of peel the onion and say, okay, what's the problem? Let's understand the problem. So you kind of build that trust. So for me, personally for me, is listening. So how do you listening? Listen to what their problems are, and even if they come with a solution, kind of ask questions to understand and probe, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? And then come up with a solution and execute. So that builds the trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a step-by-step approach, because I've been with Schneider for like 20 months. First 6 months, it was difficult. Nobody understands me, nobody knows me. But now they'll come to me, because they realize that, okay, I've done that.
Now, do the IT people come to you, or the
Business
side?
people.
So both. So you've built that trust among them. You're the advocate of IT.
Yes.
And so how do you balance your responsibilities for the tactical as you're doing that, being that advocate on the business side? So one of the things in the back of my head that I'm thinking about is that maybe there's another level of management that has to come in at some point over the next few years, that you have that tactical IT leader versus that advocate IT leader, and they work in tandem. Do you think that's happening?
I mean, to me, it's a journey, right? So even if you start tactical, you're not ending there. So you need to explain to a stakeholders, like, how can you go to the next step, right? So it's a step-by-step approach. So if you start with your vision and then they have a burning problem happening now, so it won't work out. So you adapt where you want to be. And I think you will still need tactical. I think that's where the business are, because that's how it is. So we cannot get away with that, but we have to keep pushing. How can we push it? And that, as you said, trust plays a major role. So once they trust in you, then when you talk visionary stuff, they will listen to you. Okay. So it's not the other way around.
All right, Mark. So if you were a tree, no. So what do you want to be? I was going to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? But that's not nice.
Well, that's actually okay to say.
So in terms of your career path, so all this is happening. Business is integrating with IT. It's all becoming one big happy family in terms of the customer and the focus and the product and the corporation. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I think continuing the path that you're talking about, which is you really just continuing to build that trust. One of my recent kind of guiding principles is lead with trust, literally lead with trust. I don't think there's another way to lead, but it is spending the time understanding what the actual if you have a direction you want to go, but there's a pain point that has to be addressed, you have to address it. But as you do that, you're building the trust that allows you to speak into the future, not just react to what you're receiving.
Yeah. So do you see yourself sitting on the business side and still having an involvement with IT in terms of direction of,
yes.
Personally, where do you want to be?
Yeah. Yes, I do. One of the questions in our prep was, should the CIO or should, on the product management side of things, should that person be the one that's liaising? Mm-hmm. Well, the answer is yes, but if you are not in a huge organization, that better be your job if you're CIO or IT leader.
Right.
It is your job to do that, and I do see myself doing that in the future.
Yeah, smaller organizations are unique because you might be sweeping the floor one day and doing some tactical project the next, so it's difficult. And Frank, you described yourself as a corporate leader, that you have that recognition at Fordham. How difficult was it to get that recognition?
Okay. Can I just add one thing too?
No, Frank, you cannot.
No, on the trust. You need to build a team that you trust so that you are free to do the relationship management. And that may mean that, in one vertical, they're only doing it 90% of the way you would have, or 92. You have to live with that. And it will mean, as someone mentioned last night, they're fighting. That executive team is not always copacetic. But trust is critical. I was on a CIO radio interview a couple of years ago. It was just on this, trust in the organization. And so it goes in all directions, right? You have to relate up, out, and down. You have to trust the team. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be, there are battles sometimes, everyone has their way of managing that. You asked me a question.
Corporate.
Well, I was hired in that way. So I was really the founding CIO at Fordham. Previously, I guess the kind of CTO ran things, and it reported to somebody they called the CIO, but he was really a facilities guy, and he was a very popular executive. He ran our Manhattan campus, and he passed away prematurely. So for 9 months, IT was run by the CFO, so you can imagine how that was. And because they had such pain over the loss of this gentleman that they were a little slow to start a recruitment, and then they called Polanski at Korn Ferry, and he found me. But of course, when you're hired in, and I think everyone knows this, they think they understand the set of problems, but they don't. You have to do discovery. It's a different set. My CEO would call it neuralgic issues with IT, but some of them were totally managed by the users. They were not IT problems, and some of them were IT problems. So one of the things that I tried to establish was the difference between someone did something wrong, it was a bad process, or I would use a bad word. Bad things just happen. I won't use the word that I said. There's two things we have to distinguish, because sometimes things it's IT, it's not gonna be perfect. And then it's just what everyone's been talking about. A lot of time spent with the vice presidents and deans, let me say again, a dean is the head of it's like a president of a company, right? It's within your corporation. And engaging them in our planning process, bringing them in, making them feel committed. And we like to have strategies as opposed to a strategic plan. And then we try to fit, initiatives into those strategies. So it's a lot, it's all relationships. Board time was very important, okay? Some of the board members, a board member in a nonprofit isn't completely sure what his or her job is except to give a certain amount of money per year that's required, right? So how much do they really get involved? It's a fuzzier line in many ways than in a corporation. But a lot of the trustees, could see what the issues were, and they wanted to be more go-go than the CEO. And another test for me was how I handled the board. Did I stay true to management, but make the key points that we needed to start the transition?
Yeah, so the key point is you actually took the flag, you ran with it, and timing and being everything, unfortunately, and that helped you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and focus on, in these last few minutes, on adopting that product management mindset. So one IT leader I talked to recently referred to a product management mindset as a difference between the how and the what. With the product team is the how, and the tech team is the what. So how do you instill that? And I'm going to focus and ask Raj in that. How do you instill that in a large corporation where you have so much to look at? How do you is it putting together agile teams or team structures? Is it totally adopting a new culture? Just what tactics would you take toward that?
So I think, to me, product management means accountability, right? Because a lot of times if you do IT projects, you deliver and then you're out, right? So with product management, you not only deliver, but you're also taking next step as well. So how do you do that? Mm-hmm. And I think the accountability factor comes into play, because or else it'll become very project specific, mm-hmm. and it won't be a product. And then you'll say, okay, I've delivered it, it's done. What we have seen is that agile is good, but it's not just enough, right? Because how do you bring that ecosystem? So it's the ecosystem mentality, and kind of bring that ecosystem to say, okay, we have done this now. What is next for next 3 months, next 6 months? So how do you plan? So the planning capability is a huge thing for us.
Life cycle planning.
Yeah, because it's a life cycle management, right? So how do you manage the life cycle, and how do you plan? And it's not just about end of the year budget and then say, okay, I got it. Now I can do whatever I want. So it's about and then providing. I think I being in customer experience, how is it enabling the customers or a stakeholder, and how so we need to look at the metrics as well, whether that is panning out or not. So it's kind of the process, the planning, and the metrics.
So tell me about the metrics, and Mark can chime in this after you answer, Raj. How do you measure that? I mean, in terms, you can't measure it, say we sold a lot of products, or we had a happy customer, and you can't measure it in number of help desk tickets anymore because that's too tactical. Is it a whole new metrics you need to measure this stuff, the success of programs?
Yeah, if you look at the journey where the trend is, that so a lot of times we all map customer journeys or a student journey. It's all about needs, but if you look at, there's a trend which is all about expectation. That means that's where the AI comes into picture. So we have to provide in real time, contextually, what they want. So that expectation, so that's a different kind of a metrics we need to understand. So there's the empathy, I think people call it empathy.
Yeah.
So we need to understand it's not about hard, hard metrics like we are selling this much. We also need to understand whether are they loyal, are they coming back. So that part also is huge for us.
All right, and Mark, since that's the extreme, we have the mothership over there. So you work for People's Bank,
yes.
And I think the title says you have to know your customer.
You do have to know your customer. The example I've been thinking of is about 5 years ago, we really expanded pretty aggressively into the mortgage area. And for a bank our size, the mortgage was actually double the size of the bank itself. Which was a new area, and they didn't know how to manage it. It grew so fast that they actually didn't understand how to even know whether they were making money on a particular branch. Okay, so we established a reporting structure, just a reporting group, and that really over time, working with the business analyst on the bank side, morphed into something that was much more than that. It ended up becoming a business process reimagining and automation. And so we fulfilled the original requirements, which is help us understand how we're going to make money, or are we actually making money on these mortgages. But then as it turned into something else, it became a much more quickly iterative process. The person who we originally had really wanted to do waterfall, right? It was, hey, give me all the requirements and let's talk about this for a couple of weeks and then I'll deliver something. And what ended up actually happening, which was much more productive, was they began to understand the business itself and the business processes, and it allowed that group to start doing a very quick turnaround on, hey, I want to see something like, what is my turn times for closing? I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
And they would be able to, understanding the data, be able to turn that very quickly and say, how does this look? What am I missing? What's the next step? Which I think a lot of people do, but it was new for us.
Yeah.
We weren't really in that space
So
before.
it's making relevant and relevant.
Yeah, it was really, and as that happened, we realized that we could use some of the data that we were starting to gather and put together to do other things, and to start automating processes that people used to sit and open up a screen and click on something, and we realized that we could use some of the same background processes we're using for reporting to actually automate those processes. And then you start getting into things, we can reduce turn times, we can make the processes more...
And that's when the metrics come in,
yeah,
which is
and
measurable improvements,
right.
success rates, and all that stuff.
Yes, and those things became measurable, and then that has a direct feedback on what the customer sees. They see a quicker turn time for whatever happens, whatever process they are in the mortgage business. And then it started to expand even beyond that. So once we established that particular level of trust, we were able to go on into different areas of the bank beyond mortgage. And they said, hey, if you can do that with us, with mortgage, what could you help us with?
Yeah.
And a lot of it was, at that point, was sitting down and with a particular group and saying, tell us what you do in a typical day. Just actually show us what's going on.
Yeah.
And it would typically take about an hour of doing that. And they would say, you're doing what?
Yeah.
And you're taking how long to do that? And that's where that data, it's siloed in this spreadsheet, and it should be pulled in to where we can actually use it for
So by
the
osmosis,
15 other people that are
osmosis
using
went to
it.
other parts of the company. I wish we had more
Yeah.
time. We're out of time.
Yeah.
I invite everyone to question people on the panel, meet them later. I actually have 15 copies of a study, of white paper we did on business integration, on the CIO as a corporate officer. If you give me your card, I will give it to you, one of those 15. If I run out of copies, give me your card anyway. I'll make sure you get a copy. I want to thank my panelists. I wish I had more time to go through my exhaustive list of questions, but I don't. And thanks to the audience. And stay away from the eggs next time. I want more interactivity.